Here goes nothing. What's up, everyone? We got another list this week. This time it is the 15 albums I hated in 2018. Now, as you guys know, a lot of people like putting together their best and worst albums of the year list, but I'm really bad at arranging albums from best to worst. It's just tough for me. So instead, I'm doing just the 15 albums that I really didn't like this year, and then I'm gonna have another list as well for the albums that I loved. Now, to make this list, I was lucky I actually had 15. It's pretty much just all the albums, EPs, mixtapes, blah 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 blah, that I gave an awful rating to in 2018. As I said, there were 15, and I figured I'd do this because, as you guys know, last year I did a list of just every album I reviewed in the year, but that's because last year I only really covered albums for about 4 to 6 months. I started doing reviews in like July or August, so because of that I was able to talk about every album I reviewed. This year, since I was doing them throughout the whole year, it would be pointless for me to talk about every album I reviewed arranged by my rating. Awful, bad, okay, good, or excellent. So I'm just gonna highlight the awfuls and the excellents. Luckily, there's 15 awfuls and 35 excellents, so this video is the 15 albums that I hated. In terms of the way they're ordered, most of these can interchange with each other. I've kind of just arranged them in terms of, you know, which ones really made me the angriest and which made me like the most annoyed. So number 15 was just the one that annoyed me the least. Number 1 is the one that annoyed or angered me the most. So let's get started. And like I said, there are going to be a few EPs or mixtapes on both of my lists, so I will specify if they are EPs or mixtapes, if they're not albums. Again, I also have my computer over here next to me, just so I don't get lost and I remember what I wrote. And I'm wearing the same shirt as the last video, because I'm filming these in the same day. So here we go, number 15. The number 15 album that I hated in 2018. This one I really didn't want to hate because it was just an EP. It's Jaden Smith's Sire the Electric album. See, I didn't really want to hate it because I thought that Jaden found a really interesting, kind of hazy, nocturnal sound that he could play with on this EP. The problem just was that he didn't play with it. It sounded great on the first track, but that was really my favorite from the EP just by virtue of it being the first track. Everything else just repeated it, wash, rinse, and it just dulled out. I didn't want to really be hard on it because it's an EP and because it tried something different, but 1 out of 5 songs. Yeah, sorry, Jaden. Number 14, Imagine Dragons with their latest album, Origins. This album, lyrically and in terms of its message, I know it means well and the writing is typically fine here, but I think my problem is just that Imagine Dragons, to me, they just feel so content in putting out overproduced rock and occasionally electronic crossover, and it just clashes. I feel like ever since Radioactive and Demons became big, they've just decided to actually go bigger in terms of their sound by overproducing the hell out of their song. And that's just the problem here. There's so much here that's just way too heavy, way too overdone, and just frankly kind of annoying. I don't know, maybe that's just me. I don't know. At number 13, I feel like this is one that might get me a bit of hatred, but it could be worse because I've seen people put it higher on their lists. Nicki Minaj with her latest album, Queen. This album, to me, just reeked of desperation, and it reeked of Nicki trying to keep her crown while also being super insecure about it. I'm not even gonna really talk too much about all the other controversies that she was wrapped up in this year. The whole modeling for an anti-LGBT magazine, shaming sex workers after being so sex positive during her career, the Juana's World thing where she sent super nasty messages to a blogger and her stans told said blogger to kill herself and found pictures of her 4-year-old, the Travis Scott beef when she didn't go to number 1, the Cardi B beef. I'm not going to talk too much about it because this is about the music, and in terms of the music, this album to me not only reeks of desperation but just of really bad production. It's a really poorly produced album. There's really not many compelling instrumentals here. Nicki herself honestly sounds a bit repetitive throughout this thing. And I think just my overall issue is that, I guess I will talk about the whole number 1 scandal thing. Nicki is so concerned with going number 1 and with being the queen and with holding on to her crown and her relevance that she forgot what made her the queen in the first place. good music. Nicki's an artist that I've honestly defended. I've defended her against a few of my friends that absolutely hate her because I think there is appeal to her music. This album though, I'm not seeing it. And the reason it's also not higher on my list is because I really feel like as much as I didn't like this thing, I didn't want to hate it. I wanted to like it, but I just couldn't. And it's also lower because unlike some of the other artists here, I can actually see Nicki bouncing back from this and putting out something more compelling. I feel like what she has to do is not wall off the criticism and not react so negatively and so angrily to it. I think she kind of exists in this world where she's trying to wall off the criticism and only listen to her barbs, that she's kind of losing sight of actually making good, wide-reaching music. And while I respect the Barb's passion for the most part, outside of the fact that they called me a terrorist on Twitter and told a woman to go kill herself, I just kind of feel like she needs to kind of listen to some of the criticism that she's been getting from general music critics and stuff like that, take it in stride, and come through with something bigger with her next album, something better. I feel like if she is insecure about losing her crown, play off that in the music. It can be really weird when you're trying to portray yourself as a queen while also being insecure about the fact that you're losing your relevance. If she does make something that's a little more personal with her next record, I'd be on board with it. If she really made something that tackled that topic, I think it could be fascinating. For now though, Queen just isn't it. Queen just doesn't do it for me. But again, I think she has a better chance of bouncing back than my number 12 pick, Takeoff, with The Last Rocket. Why is it that the Migos have just decided collectively to make almost everything that they put out sound exactly the same? Just standard, boring, bass level trap music, to the point where this album for me just kind of defines the term "it's so inoffensive that it offends me." It's so bog standard and basic that it's terrible. And the only reason it's not higher is because unlike some of the other Migos projects that I'll be talking about, it's only about half an hour with some change. Because it's shorter, it's at least not as aggravating. But because it's so dull and so standard at the same time, it is aggravating. Much like, speaking of Migos, our number 11 pick, Quavo, with Quavo Huncho. I mean, Quavo should be the most interesting member of the Migos because maybe it's the auto-tune, but he is the most melodic. So he should be the most interesting, but he's not. He's actually the most boring. And as if being the most boring Migo isn't enough, why did we need an hour-long album from him? Really, it's not like there's anything compelling or there's any kind of statement here. A lot of times if you're making an hour-long album, you either need to be really conceptual, you have to be telling some kind of story, or there has to be great tracks from top to bottom, no filler. But Migos, it just feels like all their music these days is filler, so we don't need an hour-long Quavo album. And to continue to speak of the Migos, number 10 on our list is Culture 2. I already have the unpopular opinion that the first Culture just wasn't that intriguing to me, and I just didn't really care for it all that much. So how did they make it worse with Culture 2? Well, they decided that they were going to make a 24-song album that was like an hour and a half long, and it was terrifying. It was a really scary experience listening to it, just because it's 24 songs that almost all sound exactly the same. And yeah, there's some highlights on here, but that's just by way of it being so long that there has to be a few highlights. Oh god. And I think it's terrifying because I haven't even really done an album review or reaction on this channel yet, but they've already announced that Culture 3 is coming out in January, so one of my first reactions is going to be that. I'm terrified. Number 9 on our list is Justin Timberlake with Man of the Woods. One of the most effortless, boring, goofy, silly pop albums this year. I almost fell asleep just listening to it. It was so just gross. Like, there were songs on there that lyrically made me feel like I needed a shower, and I feel like Justin saying that this album was a return to his roots was just code for all of his charisma is gone. And I just have no idea where he could go from this thing. It was awful. Just a really weird, gross mix of electronic and country songs that just don't work. Number 8 on our list, we have Lil Yachty with Lil Boat 2. Yachty is someone that I kind of want to root for because he is kind of a charismatic guy. He's kind of goofy, fun-loving, silly, and I think that that vibe shows in some of his songs like One Night or even Bring It Back, even if that song's not super popular. I Spy, Broccoli. He has that kind of vibe to him. But it feels like with Lil Boat 2, he tried so hard to just go down the route of very basic, standard, murky trap music that didn't play to his character all that well. And speaking of Yachty, number 7 on the list is also his latest album, Nothing to Prove. Again, just kind of proving the mantra that these artists think more is better when it's not. More is not better. And it's just something where I think he needs to take a break. I hear this album, and as much as I want to root for Yachty, he just needs a break. And I need some water because these bad albums are really making me tired. Number 6 on our list, we have Jaden Smith with The Sunset Tapes, A Cool Tape Story, the mixtape. I wasn't really crazy about Sire, but I had people tell me that Jaden is actually a pretty unique and pretty interesting artist. This mixtape doesn't prove it. It really just feels like he's trying to jump on the very basic, very standard kind of poppy trap instrumentals, and it feels like he's just selling himself short here. If anything, I think what this mixtape does is it serves to kill hype that could be coming to his next album, Aries. I think that I've heard that even fans of Jaden didn't really care for this tape, so I think it just serves to kill some of the excitement, and that kind of sucks, because I know he has some fans that really like his stuff. But, shit happens, I suppose. Number 5 on this list, we have 30 Seconds to Mars with their latest album, America. Honest question, why is it that all rock bands these days feel like they have to go EDM? Like, even Fall Out Boy, I actually liked their latest album, Mania, a little bit, but why do they all have to jump on the basic, bland EDM trends with these, like, really terrible beat drops that just are not good? And for an album that's called America and was advertised as being a big political statement, why is there so little politicking going on this album? It just feels like it's love songs. It just feels like an exercise in pretentiousness, and I can't get behind it. Number 4, Anne-Marie with her latest album, Speak Your Mind. It's just boring dime a dozen pop music with some of the most gross lyrics that I've heard. Boring production, no catchy hooks, and back to the lyricism point, the biggest singles from this thing are the culprit for those lyrics. Like 2002, how it interpolates songs from 2002, apparently, but some of the songs aren't even from 2002, or how it's a song about 11-year-olds falling in love, which is kind of gross, or how Friends is an anthem for the friend zone. I don't know who was asking for something like that, but okay. Hell, I'm not gonna try to get personal, but I've been friend zoned several times this year, and never was I asking for an anthem for the friend zone. And I talked to people about Anne-Marie a good bit, and they're like, but Rockabye is a great song. And yeah, I like Rockabye, but that doesn't mean the album itself is good. Actually, that's a deluxe edition bonus track, so that hurts the album. Really, I think that the reason this album didn't do well, even though Rockabye did, is because Clean Bandit wasn't producing this album. At number 3, I've seen a lot of people putting this at the top of their lists, actually, and it's gonna be here on mine, Lil Xan's debut album, Total Xanarchy. I have to throw in this reference. This album is more boring than Tupac. I know, surprising. But yeah, this album is so boring. There's no good production on here. It's just bog standard trap music that often feels like it contradicts itself. Xan is not really that interesting of a performer, and there is a song on here that I've added to my playlist and I like listening to, and that's Shine Hard with Ray Shrimmerd, but the only reason it really succeeds is because Ray Shrimmerd takes over the song and it feels more like a Ray Shrimmerd track than a Lil Xan track. Maybe that's what Xan should do, just let people feature on his songs and then maybe the production will be better. At number 2, we have Behad Behavy with her debut mixtape 15. Did you guys really expect anything out of this? Even as someone that's tried to, in some ways, defend Danielle and say that some of the ways that she's been acting show that she's trying to mature, this tape isn't it. This is boring, again, very bog standard. I'm kind of repeating myself that a lot of this is very standard, but that's just kind of what's happening here. It's very base level trap music, and I don't find that Danielle Bregoli is really a super interesting MC just yet. Maybe when she's a bit older, but this just feels like an attempt to keep her 15 minutes of fame going right now, even if it means putting out not so good quality music to keep that going. It doesn't feel like she's taking her 15 minutes and using it to put out amazing music. She's just doing it to put out music, and it's disappointing. And now the number 1 worst album of 2018, Nav with his latest album, Reckless. Really, I feel like everyone's already kind of shat on this thing for what it is, and I don't think I need to, but I'll just point out that Nav is a literal emotionless robot, and that even his production, usually people talk about how Nav is a pretty good producer, and I do agree to some extent, but his production here isn't doing it for me. It's really not. And, you know, outside of that production, production. Again, I feel like it's an album where Siri could do something more interesting. Siri could even write some better lyrics, because there's some really gross stuff on this thing, like that line where he said losing a girl is like losing his kidneys. Again, trust me, I've had heartbreak several times this year, but I would never say it was like losing a kidney. Plus, you can live without a kidney. And then there's that awful bar about non-consensually like grabbing a girl's ass and like, you know, having sex with her or something like that. Ugh. Yeah, this album was just really bad. I would like to blank it out of my memory forever. Yo, talking about those albums actually has legitimately made me tired. I was gonna record my albums I loved list right after this, and I might, but wow. That just reminded me that this year had some really shitty albums. Oh, by the way, I thought I'd mention this too, but the reason that 6ix9ine isn't on this list is because with all the shit he's done, I can't even support him by listening to his music outside of Fifi, which I had to listen to for my list that I just posted, the Billboard list. So I roundabout ignored Dummy Boy. I didn't even try to listen to it. I mean, I saw Dylan Jackson's reaction video to it. Go subscribe to him. I saw his reaction to it, and just from listening to it, it probably would have landed on my list if I listened to it myself. Otherwise though, yeah, there were some shit albums this year. What were some that you hated? Were they on this list? Were there albums that I just completely glossed over that you hated? Sound off down in the comments. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching this video. Hit like and subscribe if you want to. You don't have to. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.